Well, good evening, beautiful people. Good evening. It is an excellent day to serve an excellent God in and with the spirit of excellence. Good evening. I am Pastor Sherry, Chaplain Sherry, Coach Sherry, your community pastor Sherry, the curator of the Preachers Academy. Welcome tonight to our final night of our Sacred Movement series. The final night of our Sacred Movement series. Good evening. Good evening. We have moved through death, through departure. We've named grief. We've set in transition, and tonight is about the fire. So, welcome tonight. As you are coming in, would you please like, share, tag all of those good things and let us know that you are here. It has been I have learned so much in preparing for this series, and I pray that it has been a blessing to you also. So, again, come on in tonight on our final night of this three-night revival, this three-night series, Sacred Movements, as we've looked at some pivotal points in the life of Jesus. But tonight, our third night is about this is the moment where what has been internal is going to become external. We are on the final move. Good evening, Dr. Geraldine. So glad to see you here. Good evening. Good evening, Reverend Tracy. So good to see you tonight. Listen, go ahead on like, share, tag, all of those things and share. Because if you have found value, that means that other people in your circle, your clique, or your crew may also find value in tonight. So let us get started. So again, just as a moment, a time of review, we were been talking about sacred movement, the internal and external shifts that carry divine weight. And if you've been with us for the last two nights from day one, you ought to have recognized the shifts in your life, the divine shifts that carry weight, that were pivotal moments in your life, turning points where God reveals, God heals, God calls, or transforms. Again, we said that these shifts can be loud like fire, or they can be silent like grief. They can be look like endings, but they lead to beginnings. They are moments where the veil is real thin and something holy breaks through. So again, hopefully you've had an opportunity to um, do some reflection and look at and think about those pivotal moments, those turning points, those sacred moments where something shifted in your life and you knew without a shadow of a doubt that what was not going to be anymore. So our our three sacred movements, we've talked about death, what we must release in order to rise, what we must release in order to rise, what are the things in our life that must die in order for something new to come about. Then we set intention of the departure between death and what and the new, the old and the new, that in between time, that transition time, that waiting time where it seems like God is silent, where it seems like what God has promised is not going to come to pass. But we realize and we recognize that departure, this tension of in between, this ascension is holy. It is sacred and it is holy. And so tonight, on our final night, we are talking about the divine fire. That thing that has been stirring up on the inside is ready to burst, to come forth. It is ready to come forth. And when it does, it gives us the courage to speak and to move in spirit-filled power. So, as a moment of reflection, as others are coming in, listen, it's a good time to ask yourself, what have you been holding back? That spirit is now asking you to speak. What have you been holding back? That spirit is now asking you to speak. And if you are not ready to say that thing, I want you to at least put an emoji of fire in the comment section. Drop an emoji of fire in the comment section to let me know that you have something that you are holding back, and the spirit is saying now is the time to speak. If you're not, this is the time where we are dropping it all. This is the time where the fire is here. We don't have to wait anymore. The fire is here. Do I have any takers? Is there anyone who is holding back something that the spirit is now asking you to speak? So let's get into our time tonight. Tonight we're going to look at two scriptures. We're going to look at the Old Testament prophecy of Joel 2:28 through 29. And it says, then afterward, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. Even on the male and female slaves, in those days, I will pour out. I see you, Reverend Tracy. I see that fire. I see it. Your young men shall see visions, even on the male and the female slaves. In those days, I will pour out my spirit. So that's the prophecy. That's the Old Testament text, right? So let us now move to the New Testament text, the Acts text, the text that's going to be read on Sunday in churches that are going to observe Pentecost. And I want us to hear the whole thing. So I'm going to play this video, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it in the NRSV. I want us to hear Acts 1 through 21. Let's see if we can get it playing. Let's see here. Let me go back. Here we go.
And Pamphylia, Egypt.
I'm sorry, I'm going to start at the
And at this sound, the crowd gathered and was bewildered because each one heard them speaking in the native language of each.
We're going to get this tonight. Technology is good until it's not. Oh, man. Oh, I went too far. I'm going to get it. So we're just going to go through all of these until I get to the one for tonight. Thank you for your patience tonight. Thank you for your patience tonight. Here we go.
And Pamphylia.
I want to get to.
When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place. And suddenly, from heaven there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues, as of fire, appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them ability. Now there were devout Jews from every nation under heaven living in Jerusalem. And at this sound the crowd gathered and was bewildered, because each one heard them speaking in the native language of each. Amazed and astonished, they asked, "Are not all these who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that we hear each of us in our own native language? Parthians, Medes, Elamites, and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabs. In our own languages we hear them speak about God's deeds of power." All were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, "What does this mean?" But others sneered and said, "They are filled with new wine." But Peter, standing with the 11, raised his voice and addressed them. "Men of Judea and all who live in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and listen to what I say. Indeed, these are not drunk, as you suppose, for it is only 9 o'clock in the morning. No, this is what was spoken through the prophet Joel. In the last days it will be, God declares, that I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. Even upon my slaves, both men and women, in those days I will pour out my Spirit, and they shall prophesy. And I will show portents in the heaven above and signs on the earth below, blood and fire and smoky mist. The sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the Lord's great and glorious day. Then everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved."
All right. So, how does the Joel 2 text, right? How does the Joel 2 text relate to Pentecost, relate to Acts 2, right? So, if you jump over, and we're not going to do it tonight, but Acts 2, 16 and 17, Peter actually stands up, and Joel 2 is his text that he's preaching from, right? He stands up and he quotes from Joel 2, and he quotes Joel's word for word, right? Claiming that what they are experiencing, the outpouring that they are experiencing of the Holy Spirit, people speaking in diverse tongues, unexpected preaching, is not chaos, but fulfillment, prophetic fulfillment. So Peter takes a text from the Old Testament prophet Joel 2:28 and 29. And Peter quotes it word for word and said, look, because remember the people said, what's all of this going on? Are these people drunk? It's just 9 o'clock it's just 9 o'clock. And so Peter says, no, I'm going to tell you what's going on. They are experiencing the fulfillment of the prophecy. Joel said it would happen, and Acts showed how it happened, right? Joel said what happened, what would happen, and Acts shows us how it happens. Joel, the second thing is that, so the first thing it relates to Pentecost is it's a fulfillment. But the second thing is that Joel prophesies radical inclusion. Joel prophesies radical inclusion. Joel 2 promises that God's Spirit will fall on all flesh, not just prophets, not just priests, not just kings, but sons and daughters. So that means it crosses gender boundaries, old and young. It crosses generational boundaries. And it says your male and your female slaves. So it crosses also class and power lines. You see, in the ancient world, prophecy was reserved for elite men. I'll say that again. Prophecy was reserved for elite men. And so for Joel to say that no, there is coming a time when the Spirit will come and God's Spirit will pour out on all people, young, old, male, female, bond, free, right? Joel's prophecy is a disruptive one. Joel's prophecy is a disruptive one. Joel disrupts the power of the status quo. Because at Pentecost, the Spirit honors Joel's words by falling on the Galileans. And we're going to talk about why that's so important. On the Galileans, women, poor folk, linguistically diverse Jews from all over the diaspora. So Joel sets the stage for the Spirit that dismantles hierarchies. Joel prophesied that the hierarchies that they had set up were going to be dismantled, and that God's Spirit is going to be upon all people. And in the prophecy, Joel specifically centers the marginalized. He centers the women. He centers the old, the young. He centers slaves. But why is it those of us who claim that we have God's Spirit, we want to contain God's Spirit and put it back before Joel's prophecy, as if Joel didn't ever say this? Why are we in the 21st century trying to contain God's Spirit and decide and say who God's Spirit will rest, rule, and abide with? Why do we do that? And the third thing is that both Joel and Pentecost indicates a new era. It indicates a new era because the background of Joel's text, of Joel's prophecy comes during a time of national crises. So if you go and read like all of Joel 2, you'll understand that they are in a time of national crises. There's devastation, there's locusts, there's drought, there's social collapse. And the Spirit's outpouring is a sign of restoration and divine renewal. So when we get to Pentecost comes after the trauma of the cross. Pentecost comes to people who were in Jerusalem at the time of the crucifixion. They still had these images in their minds. They could still hear the hammering, right? The trauma of the cross. And then to make matters worse, when Jesus does come back, he leaves again, he ascends, he goes up, and the people are in a state of confusion. They're in a state of confusion. There's this tension of waiting because Jesus says, listen, I need y'all to go back to Jerusalem, to go back, and I need you to wait. I need you to wait. So there's a tension in the waiting because he's already blessed them. He's already promised them, but they have to wait. The Spirit falls to say something new is being born. Something new is being born. You're not just surviving, you are stepping into your purpose. What looks like chaos, what looks like chaos, what looked like confusion is the coming forth of power so that these disciples could then go forth. Joel's prophecy is not, and the fulfillment at Pentecost is a divine declaration that God speaks through the silence, that God pours power into places the world ignores. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. God's Spirit does not require permission from systems that exclude. This is very important, and this matters for Black folk, for Black women, for queer folk, for working class folk, for those who've been told it's not your turn, or you don't belong, or you don't have something to say. God's Spirit does not care about systems. God's Spirit does not care about barriers and walls that we've erected, because Spirit blows where she wants to. Spirit blows where she wants to. So I just need to know if you're still with me, because this is sounding good to me. So I just want to make sure that I'm not going too fast and you are right here with me tonight, that you are with me tonight as we are talking about that has been inside is ready to come forth. That is inside is ready to burst forth, to come forth. So as we look at this audience, as we look at the players, as we look at the characters in this story, right? Who were these Galileans? Because remember, they said, aren't these people Galileans? Who are these Galileans? Well, the Galileans, they were Jewish, but they were othered. So what do I mean? They were Jewish people, right? But they were othered, right? I don't know if you've ever been considered othered, right? You are not in the dominant, right? You're in a family, but you're not at the table because you are othered, right? And so these Galileans, they were ethnically Jewish, but they were socially marginalized, but they were spiritually fierce. The Galileans were Jewish, but they lived in the northern part of ancient Palestine, far from the religious center of Jerusalem, because you see, Jerusalem was the home base. Jerusalem was the place where everything was going on. It was the city of Zion in Jerusalem, right? But these Galileans were othered. While they followed Jewish laws and practices, they were often seen as Judeans, and they were often seen as less refined, less pure, less theologically sharp. They were more rural, more multilingual, and lived in a closer contact with Gentiles and other cultural groups, right? They had a dialect. right? They were considered less than. So they were Jews, but they were not top of the line Jews. That's why in Acts 2, the people are shocked that the Galileans are speaking in multiple languages. Are these Galileans? They were culturally mixed and multilingual, right? The Galileans would have spoken Aramaic, common Jewish language, some Greek, the language of commerce, and possibly Hebrew that was used in religious texts, right? So they were multilingual. Jesus was a Galilean, right? He spoke in Aramaic. So these cultural this cultural mix that they had going on, they were they had been exposed to a lot, but they were rural in their mindset, right? They were country people. They were country people. Um, think of Nazareth and Bethsaida and Capernaum and Magdala were all Galilean towns. The third thing we need to know about these Galileans is that they were economically vulnerable. These were poor folk, right? These were peasants, these were farmers, these were artisans, these were fishermen and day laborers. That's why Jesus used all of these parables with language that they could understand. He talked about fishermen. He talked about farming. Do you know how many stories and parables that Jesus used when he dealt with, when he was teaching? He used language that they could understand. He used language that they could understand. These people, many of the Galileans lived under economic strain due to Roman taxation, to debt, to landlords who exploited them, right? To be wealthy in Galilee was really a rare thing, because most people live in just getting by. They live paycheck to paycheck, right? I don't know if you can identify, but a lot of these things that the characteristics of the Galilean, I don't know about you, but I know what it means to live from paycheck to paycheck. I know what it means to be heavily taxed, to be in debt. I know, right? But this is the line that Jesus comes out of. And I just think that for Jesus to ensure that the least of these understands that they are not only in the family, but they belong at the table. And so the Holy Spirit comes through the Galileans, who are able to then speak into this language where others would understand this gospel message. So that's why so many of Jesus' disciples were fishermen, they were tradesmen, or they were former tax collectors. The fourth thing we need to know about these Galileans is that they were politically exploited. Galilee was under Herodian rule, part of the Roman Empire, meaning that people had little political power, but lots of imperial burden. It kind of sounds real familiar to me. They had little political power, but Rome was on their necks. But it's been said that the Galileans were no pushover. because they were known for occasional uprisings and resistance movements and having a fiery spirit. Sometimes the Galileans were called agitators or troublemakers. And the fifth thing that we can know about them is that they were socially dismissed. Judeans often looked down on Galilee, on the Galileans, for their rural accents, their proximity to the Gentiles, which would be make them be unclean, right? The less formal education, the idea that anything good could come out of Nazareth, right? When they said that, they were really being sarcastic. They were really throwing ethnic and racial slurs. Yet the Galileans were faithful, but they were seen as common, poor people, not fit for leadership. Not fit for leadership. So here's time of reflection. I'm going to slow down a minute and let you answer this in your own mind. If the Spirit is speaking through your story, so we've heard who the Galileans were. We have heard through what people thought of them. We have heard their social economic. We know their education stories. We know that they were poor people. We understood that they were considered less than. But the question is, what's your story? If the Spirit is speaking through your story, what is she saying? What is the Spirit saying to you and to us through you? If she is speaking through your story. So we've talked about the Galileans, but who was in the crowd at Pentecost? Who was in the crowd at Pentecost? So remember the setting here, the setting that we have here tonight. They were in Jerusalem during the Feast of Weeks, right? Weeks. Pentecost is 50 days. 50 days after the Passover, right? So in Jewish tradition, it was called the Feast of Weeks because it was a pilgrimage festival celebrating the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai and the first harvest. This was one of three major pilgrimages that they made, right? So the people were in the crowd. They were diverse. They were devout Jews from all over the known world. So you got this range of people in Jerusalem at this time. So Acts 2:5-11 shows how radically inclusive the crowd was. All over the world, these were ethnically Jewish people who had lived for generations outside of Judea, and they often spoke Greek or other regional languages. Number two, they were God-fearing converts. So there were some in the crowd who were Gentiles who worshiped the God of Israel. They were not born Jewish, but they had embraced the Jewish faith and were now full participants in the pilgrimage life. They would have been on the margins of Jewish community, not fully embraced, but present. They weren't fully embraced by the people, but they believed in the God of Israel, and so they made their way to Jerusalem, and they were present. I don't know if you caught that. There will be times that we are not embraced in spaces, but we ought to be present. We ought to be present, not because of the people, but because of the God of Israel, the God of our ancestors, our God. And the third group of people who were in this crowd were pilgrims and poor travelers. Not everyone in this crowd was elite. Many were working class, poor, having saved for years to make this trip to Jerusalem for the festival. They represented a full socio-economic spectrum of Jewish people, from urban dwellers to nomadic merchants. So this is the people that was in the crowd. We understand the Galileans who were in the upper room, the 120 or so, but then in the crowd, we had Jewish people from all over the world who was there. So again, they were in Jerusalem for the Festival of Weeks. So Pentecost was not a new thing, right? What happened on this particular Pentecost was new, but the actual gathering in Jerusalem at this time was not new. It was a religious requirement, Deuteronomy 16:9-12, for all Jewish men specifically to appear in Jerusalem. This was a time of celebration, a time of giving thanks for the early harvest. It was a time of remembering, of honoring, of giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. So this is why they are here. So why does Pentecost matter? Why does Pentecost matter? When the crowd asked, aren't all of these who are speaking Galilean? They were essentially saying, and God chose the Galileans to ignite the church? God chose the Galileans to usher in a new era? God did not wait for them to become local, right? For the Spirit didn't translate them. Catch this. But the Spirit, she translated the message to meet the people where they were. It was so important. Remember, Jesus says, I have to go, but I'm not going to leave you by yourselves. There is coming one who is going to baptize you in the Spirit, who is going to engulf you, who is going to cover you, who is going to dwell in you to do miraculous thing. Why? To move the movement. To move the movement. I'm not here to debate about whether or not, speaking in tongues and all of this. I'm talking about on this day, on the day of Pentecost, the Galileans, empowered by Spirit, was able to speak in languages in such a way that those who had come from all over the world, and I found this here. I want to make sure that I read this to you real quick. I'm talking about this is where people came from. We had the Parthians, Medes, and Elamites came from Persia and the Iran region, Mesopotamia, modern day Iraq, Judea and Cappadocia, Palestine and central Turkey, Pontus and Asia, northern Turkey. You had southern Turkey there. You had Egypt and parts of Libya, near Cyrene, which is North Africa. Visitors from Rome, Western Europe, Cretans and Arabs, Mediterranean islands, and Arabian Peninsula. God used the Galileans, and I think it's a strategic move to use the Galileans, the least of these, to get the message to the people. Why? Because the people will now go back. They will go back to Persia and Turkey and Iraq and North Africa and Western Europe and the Mediterranean, and they will take the gospel because it was given to them in a language that they could understand. The Spirit translated the message to meet them where they are. Pentecost affirms that proximity to power isn't a prerequisite for a divine encounter. Proximity, you don't have to be in Jerusalem. They were not going to stay in Jerusalem. See, there was a time, remember, when you go back with the tent of the meetings, that everywhere they went, they had to pick up and put down so that God could be with them. When they were in Babylon and the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed, they were saying, how can we sing Zion songs in a strange land? But on this day, they will not have to be in Jerusalem for Spirit to be with them. Pentecost affirms that proximity to power isn't a prerequisite for divine encounter. That's good news, because we don't have to be in a particular place. Spirit has broken down the barriers. Spirit has torn down the walls. And yet, thousands and thousands of years later, we are trying to erect walls and say only certain people, you can be in the family, but you can't come to the table. We do that because we set up these power structures. We set up these hierarchies. And the thing that Joel said, your sons and your daughters, we try to erect a wall to say that only the sons could come. You're old and you're young. Your male and your female slaves would suggest that no matter what station of life that you are in, Spirit power is available to you. Power is available to you. So what is it that we need to know? We have gone through these nights. What 3 things we need to know? Number 1, we must let go to live again. We must let go to live again. There are times when some people, places, or things must die in order for us to get to the next. Good evening, Pastor Bianca. So good to see you tonight. We must let go to live again. I'm going to just let that sit a moment because that is often a hard thing. Because if I let this go, then I don't know what's going to be next. I know what I got. Even if it's not working for me, I know what I have. I'm going to stay in this relationship. It's not working for me, but I know what I got. This job is not working for me. I'm stressed every day going, but it's what I got. Because letting go requires trust. Letting go requires trust. The second thing that we explored in these 3 days is we must not give up in the in-between. We must not give up in the in-between. We must not give up in the transition. I'm a witness. Transitions are hard. That in-between time. And I told y'all the best example I had was when I was growing hair. And I'm gonna let my hair grow. I'm a wait until I get this much new growth, right? Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. Why? Because when I was wearing hair, it had to be sculpted and shaped just right. So I would get it cut off, go ahead on and put that perm in there because this in between is not working for me. And so sometimes we give up too soon because the in between time is the going back to Jerusalem and waiting in the upper room is too hard at times. But it is in the upper room. It is in the waiting. And I'm talking to me. It is in the waiting. Here's another example. So a couple of months ago, I injured my foot. And over the last couple of weeks, my foot has been giving me hell. I go to the doctor today, to the podiatrist. He takes the x-rays. He says, the good news is it's not broken. But here's the bad news. You got to be in a boot for 3 weeks. He might as well told me the foot was broken. Because you're telling me now 3 weeks, I got things to do. I got places to go. But I have to be in this boot for 3 weeks. The transition is the boot to get to the healing of the foot on the other side. I don't want to wear the boot. I'm probably going to half wear the boot. But the blessing has already was given that in 3 weeks, 3 weeks is all you need. But you see, that's that in-between time. That's that in-between time that I'm not feeling. But I understand that if I don't go through the process, that there may be problems down the road. So I'm going to have to sit in Jerusalem and wait until the blessing, the healing that was promised comes to pass. Here's the third thing. Be assured that your voice carries fire. I don't care what station of life you're in. I don't care your social economic. I don't care your gender, your sexual identity. I don't care about any of it. Your social location, where you live. You might be just as country as me, like the Galileans, right? Your voice carries fire. So the question is, are you going to speak? Are you going to use the voice the Spirit is empowering you to use through your story? Through your story. And so, our going forth for tonight, where do we go from here? Right? You are not walking for fire. You are not waiting for fire. You are walking with fire. You are not muted. You are unleashed. The mic has already been passed. The Spirit is already speaking. So go forth, declare, disrupt, speak. Because that which was working internally is now ready to go forth externally. I pray that these 3 nights have blessed you as much as they have blessed me. And as you go into Sunday, Pentecost, that you will go with a renewed fire, knowing that your voice matters. And Spirit has empowered you to speak up. My prayer is that God's peace, presence, and power will be with you always. May all be well.